Chapter 90, 5th Year, Owls. Thursday, the 3rd of June, 1976. Owls were every bit as terrifying and satisfying as Remus had anticipated. He tried to pretend they were nothing more than the usual end-of-year exams, but this was almost impossible when everybody else seemed to have lost their heads over it. James became a veritable recluse, holed up in the library or behind his bed curtains, obsessively memorising facts and dates he had spent the rest of the year ignoring. Peter occasionally turned very pale and stared, trembling into space. Marlene had taken to ambushing Remus at various intervals throughout the day, demanding that he quiz her on this or that. Only Sirius seemed calmed about any of it, which was just typical. When even James had shut him out, he entertained himself by distracting Mary, which had the added benefit of distracting Remus, which was horrible, but bearable. "Go and find a broom cupboard like everyone else," Marlene yelled, on the edge of hysteria, throwing a clipper at the couple. They were wound together on the couch in front of the fireplace. "There's nowhere to go, though," Mary sighed to Remus in the library the day before Owls were due to begin. "Sirius won't let me up into your dorm, and boys can't get into ours, and I don't dare get caught in a cupboard somewhere. Not with this castle crawling with wannabe Death Eaters." "What?" Remus finally paid attention. "Has someone tried to hurt you, Mary?" "Oh, all the time," she shrugged, with a tired smile. "I'm used to it by now. At least, being the only black kid at my primary school prepared me for something." "That's horrible, Mary. I'm sorry." Remus squeezed her hand, feeling genuinely terrible. Mary was a very tough girl, he knew. You could get away with saying almost anything around her. She might throw a bit of a strop, but she'd forgive you quickly afterwards, and never hold it against you. Still, this was something else entirely, and it was obviously having an effect. "You're so sweet, Remus," she smiled kindly, squeezing his hand back. "Don't worry about me, though. I've got Sirius." Remus released her hand, returning to look at his work before casually asking, "What does he say about it?" "Oh, you know, that he'll defend me to death, that nothing they do can ever come between us. To be honest, I think he has a bit of a white knight complex." "Well," Remus closed his book and looked up at her. "You're no damsel in distress." Mary's face split into a lovely grin. She really was very beautiful. "Cheers, Remus. Knew I could count on you to support the women's lib argument. Right, can we go over that defence against the dark arts paper again? Professor Drosky hinted that there'd be something on either werewolves or vampires." Remus would never know whether it was the increased attacks on Muggleborns, and therefore Mary, that had caused the incident which took place after the DAD written exam. He flattered himself, once or twice, that it could have something to do with Severus's dodged pursuit of Remus, even though Sirius had promised not to retaliate. He liked to think, later on, that James and Sirius had acted out of a kind of righteous indignation that this was a chance to prove they had picked a side. In reality, it was probably a mixture of reasons, none of them noble. The heightened tension of Owls, combined with the relief of having just finished an exam, growing tensions that had been simmering all year, in fact, for a number of years, between Gryffindor and Slytherin. Severus Snape simply being an annoying prick, James wanting to impress Lily, and Sirius's merciless aggression towards anyone who so much as hinted allegiance to the other side. In short, no one was quite themselves that day, and it was hot. These two factors alone might have been enough to bring a situation to boiling point. The fact that Sirius was playing the bored aristocrat and that James was eager to please him was nothing new, and could potentially be explained away later as obnoxious teenage behaviour. Besides, those who knew Sirius, and what he had suffered, were inclined to pander to him, allowed him to put on airs, and James was particularly indulgent. The level of cruelty was certainly new, and could not be explained so easily. Unfortunately, As the years would go on, Remus would see more and more of this ruthlessness, not always from his friends, but certainly from people he had thought were good. It would always seem to Remus that this was the day the war truly started, as far as the marauders were concerned. Remus did not consider himself blameless, of course. He could have stepped in. He did put down his Transfiguration book when Lily got involved, but he had assumed she would shut everything down, scold James and move on. He certainly hadn't expected Snape to say what he had said, or for James to do what he did next. Part of him had enjoyed it too. Part of him liked seeing Snape humiliated and tormented, without Mulciber around to back him up. It was horrible to see Lily so insulted, of course, and when James started really going for it, Remus had to bite his lip to keep him from cheering and laughing along with the others. He ought to have stopped it. He ought to have stood up to his friends, taken control, and been the better man. He just didn't feel like it. Whether or not his intervention would have improved or worsened the situation, or the events that followed, Remus might never know. But he did wish he had tried. "You've blown any chance you've ever had of being with her now, mate," Sirius laughed as Lily stormed out of the dining hall later that day upon seeing James at the table. "Fine," James said, scowling. "Do you know what? I've wasted so much bloody time pining after her, and if that's how she feels—" "Isn't it how she's always felt?" Peter asked, pouring out his gravy glumly. Another casualty of the altercation with Snape. Peter and Desdemona had apparently had a blazing row over it. She thought it was bullying. She couldn't see what Snape had done wrong. "Shut it, Pettigrew." Sirius rolled his eyes. He addressed James. "Forget about her, Prongs. She's always been up herself." "Oi!" Mary slapped his thigh lightly. "Lily's my friend, if you don't mind. Though, James, I do think you'd better leave her alone for a bit. She's really upset." "Really?" Remus asked, feeling guilty. He ought to have stopped it. "Of course," Mary replied, neatly slicing up her roast potatoes. "Don't ask me why, but Snivelus has been her best friend since they were kids. I've tried telling her what a massive tosser he is, but it doesn't really get through. She feels sorry for him, I think. He's madly in love with her, of course." "Ugh, she doesn't like him back, does she?" James looked scandalised. "No," Mary shrugged. "But they're friends all the same. Or at least, they were. She's not talking to him now." Remus made a mental note to check whether she was okay. That was, if Lily was still speaking to him. Her final outburst had definitely felt like an attack on all of the marauders, not just James. Friday, the 12th of June, 1976. The Transfiguration written exam was the following week, and Remus was over-prepared, if anything. He had a burning desire to beat James, if he couldn't beat Sirius at it. He thought he could probably best them in the written, if he couldn't in the practical. The paper was 3 hours long, and demanded a huge amount of concentration. Remus only looked up twice, both times to check on Sirius. The first time, he was working on his essay, his quill moving smoothly, as if skating over the parchment, rather than scribbling away like James or Peter. The second time, he was leaning back on his chair, trying to catch James's eye. Remus sighed. It was so much harder to concentrate this closer to the moon. He felt more animal than usual. He was really looking forward to the upcoming moon, as much as he knew it was foolish. It would be the last one of the school year, and all 4 of them had been planning it quietly over the past week. Exams would be finished, and they were practically invincible, with what felt like the whole world at their feet. James swore he had caught a glimpse of a unicorn last time, and they'd been reading up on how to track them down. Remus wasn't sure what the wolf might do, faced with a unicorn, but there was no evidence he would attack. Centaurs were something else altogether. Centaurs terrified the wolf. When the exam finished, the students were instructed to stand back against the walls of the Great Hall, while McGonagall magically collected in all of their papers, alphabetically, in the most elegant use of Accio Remus had ever seen, and reinstated the house tables ready for dinner. Across the hall, Snape was glaring at James furiously. "Dunno what he wants," James tutted. "We've got detention, haven't we?" "Did the teacher see you?" Mary asked, as they wended their way over to their usual seats for dinner. "Nah, bloody Evans," Sirius groaned. "My dear friend Lily," Mary said. "Whatever," Sirius grunted. "She just better not drag it out until tomorrow night." "Why?" Mary asked, smiling as dinner appeared on their empty plates. Spaghetti bolognese. "Taking me somewhere nice for once?" "I think the 6th floor girls' loos is nice," Sirius replied sarcastically. "Anyway, no. Got something else. Marauder business." "Oh yeah, of course," Mary sighed, as if she was terribly hard done by. "I forgot I have to share my boyfriend with his boyfriends." James and Peter snickered, but Sirius bristled like a cat. "Fuck's sake," he spat, looking daggers at her from across the table. "Why'd you have to say shit like that, spiteful cow?" "Pureblood snob," she returned sweetly, twirling spaghetti on her fork. "Please," Remus said, battling a headache. "Peter and Desdemona are arguing this week. You'll get your turn next week." That made everyone laugh, and went some way to calming the atmosphere. Remus was pleased with himself. He really was getting the hang of the whole relationship thing, without ever having to actually be in one. By the time dinner was over, all was well again, and when James got up to go for detention, Sirius told him he would catch up later. "I want to make sure Mary gets to the tower okay," he explained. "You don't have to," she said. "I'm not going alone. Remus is coming too. Aren't you, Remus?" "Yeah," he nodded, hoisting his book bag up onto his shoulder. "I'm finally going to read something with a plot now that exams are over." "Such a thrilling life you lead, Moony," Sirius smirked. He clasped Mary's hand. "Still, I'd rather come with you, so I don't worry." "How can you be a prick one minute, then so sweet the next?" Mary sighed, kissing him. Remus looked away politely. That was very much the question with Sirius, he thought. That was exactly what you were getting yourself into with him. "All right, but don't be long," James said. "Detention is with Filch. Evan's a sadist, I swear." "Won't take 15 minutes, Sirius assured him. Then they set off, all three of them, Remus walking just a bit behind the whole way. "Oh, for God's sake," Mary said loudly as they reached the portrait hole, and Remus peered around to see what the hold-up was. Ah, of course. Snape again. Reflexively, Remus reached for his wand. "Look, she's not interested in talking to you, so bugger off," Mary snapped, still holding Sirius's hand. "Black," Severus drawled. "Tell your muggle bitch to shut up." "What did you call me?" Mary shrieked, as Sirius whipped out his own wand and raised it. This is the time, Remus thought to himself. This is the time to be a prefect. This is the time to be brave. Sirius had just opened his mouth when Remus stepped forward, standing between the two dark-haired boys. "Stop it right now," he said, in his most dangerous voice. "Snape, go back to your own common room. I'll give you detention. Black, just calm down, okay?" Sirius was red in the face and did not lower his wand. Snape cocked an eyebrow. "Listen to him, Black. Even Loony Lupin knows you couldn't beat me in a duel." "That's not what I said," Remus hissed. "Shut up and get lost." "Should I get someone?" Mary asked nervously, watching Sirius's face. "No, it's okay. Just go in," Remus said, watching her crawl through the portrait hole. He turned back to Sirius. "Come on, you got detention now. Let's go." "You're not looking well, Loony Lupin, Severus said suddenly. Remus turned, confused. What the hell? Coming up on your time of the month, is it? The implication was clear. Remus was speechless, shocked. He gaped, finding his voice. You don't know what you're talking about. Snape smiled, obviously thrilled to have brought such a reaction. He looked at Sirius now. You all know, of course. You and Potter and that little rodent Pettigrew. You know what he is. I always wondered why 3 purebloods would want to waste their time on filthy scum like him. But now I see. He's your little pet project, isn't he, Black? Confringo! Expelliarmus! Sirius and Remus both shouted their incantations at the same time, but Remus was quicker and had Sirius's wand in his hand before any further damage could be done. He rounded on Snape now. I don't know what you think you know, he said, very low, standing over the Slytherin boy, pointing 2 wands directly at his face. But whatever it is, you're wrong. Now get back to the dungeons before I summon McGonagall. Snape, who had paled very slightly, gave a minuscule nod before edging around the 2 Gryffindors and slinking away down the corridor. Remus didn't take the wands off him until he was definitely gone, and he didn't give Sirius's back until the last moment. Sirius snatched it and glared at him. What'd you do that for? Sirius, do you want another detention? Didn't you hear the things he said about Mary? The things he said about you? Of course I did. Remus folded his arms coldly. And he's a complete knob who you humiliated yesterday, and who you promised me you wouldn't go after. Yeah, but you promised, Sirius. Remus stared him down. He saw the look in Sirius's eyes. He had just realised that they were completely alone and standing quite close. He stepped back smartly. I know what I said, he replied, his voice still thick with rage. But I won't have him spreading rumours about you. He deserves a taste of his own bloody medicine. Sirius, Remus moaned. Please, just go to your detention and calm down, okay? I'll see you later. Years later, Remus would look back on that conversation with the benefit of hindsight and scold himself for leaving things that way. But they were not yet the men they would become, and as much as Remus liked to think he was mature and intuitive, he was about to learn that he still didn't know the first thing about Sirius. Besides, he didn't have the patience. The moon was coming. Chapter 91, 5th year, the week following. Sunday the 13th of June, 1976. Everything hurts, was Remus's first thought upon awakening. The next thought was, where are they? No one had ever come. It was warm, too warm for June, and his heart would not stop pounding with the remnants of the wolf's frustration. He clambered to his feet and staggered to the bed, dripping blood. It was supposed to have been their final hurrah, he thought miserably. They were supposed to chase unicorns. What had happened? At once, he began to worry. Something awful must have taken place. Something really terrible, for none of the marauders to come at all. Any one of them on their own might have been able to sit with him at least. Just keep him company. Even Wormtail. Good morning, dear. Madame Pomfrey entered the room quickly. She was more nervous than usual. He could smell it on her. Something had happened. Only he couldn't ask what, could he? Oh, you poor thing. It's been a bit of a night all round. She began to heal his most pressing wounds. What do you mean, all round? He asked, trying not to sound too anxious. Oh, nothing, dear. Nothing to worry about at all. In the hospital wing, He would have tried to stay awake, but Madame Pomfrey stood over him to make sure he finished his sleeping draught, and he was out like a light. "Remus, psst, you awake?" Remus opened his eyes, bleary and irritated, to see the fuzzy image of James float into view. Just James's head. "Prongs?" he croaked. "Shh," James murmured, barely moving his lips. "Pomfrey won't let anyone in to see you. Had to sneak in under the cloak. You okay?" "Not really." He could feel the new scars already without moving. "What happened? You didn't come." His friend had an unfamiliar expression. Unfamiliar in James's features anyway. Was it shame? "I'm really sorry, Moony." "Why? What happened?" Remus asked again, his voice hardening. "I can't remember anything." "It was... Godric, I don't know how to tell you." "Try." "Where was Sirius? Why wasn't he here?" Remus wanted to scream it. "Look, please don't be too angry with him, okay? He's an idiot, a bloody stupid idiot, but I don't think he realised, I don't think he meant..." Ah, it dawned on Remus all too quickly. "James, what did Sirius do?" James had never once been dishonest for as long as Remus had known him, and yet, as the story poured out of him, it was still tempered with little white lies. Whether they were meant to protect Remus or Sirius, it wasn't clear. Sirius hadn't been thinking, he had been reckless, he hadn't meant any harm. But he had caused a great deal of harm, whether he had meant to or not, and might have been responsible for much more. He told Snape," Remus said, trying to get a grip on the situation, feeling a horrible, sick, prickly sensation beginning in his stomach and creeping upwards. Not exactly," James blinked, wetting his lips. "He told him how the willow worked. And Snape... You know what Snape's like." "I know what Snape's like." James nodded, as if accepting that was fair enough. "No one got hurt. Sirius bolted it at the last minute and told me. I managed to stop Snape from getting too close, but..." "He saw me." Remus thought he might be sick. There was a terrible roaring inside his ears, as if he was falling into a dark pit. He closed his eyes. "Can you go away, please, James?" "And we would have come, me and Pete, we would have, but Snape went to Dumbledore, and you were so riled up." "James, I want you to go," he hissed, closing his eyes. "But Moony..." "Please." "Okay, mate, okay, but I'll be back." Remus said nothing, did not even open his eyes again until he heard the curtain rustling and he knew he was alone. Eventually, Madame Pomfrey poked her head around the corner. "Hello, dear," she said softly. "I've got another sleeping potion here. Now, I don't know if you want it, but give it here." He reached out an aching arm at once. Anything to make it all go away. Anything which meant he would not have to think any more. He ought to have seen something like this coming, even if James hadn't. Sirius had been in freefall since Christmas. It had just been a matter of who he would crush when he finally landed. Monday, the 14th of June, 1976. Remus Lupin would never, ever forgive Sirius Black. It was a decision he made almost the very instant he woke up the second time after that terrible moon. The weight of it all came crashing down on him, and he felt a rage so pure it burnt like a fever. This is how betrayal feels. He had not been angry like that in a very long time. At the end of his 4th year, Remus had quietly made a choice to lower his defences, to soften and relax, at least around his friends. Keeping everyone at a distance, keeping everyone slightly afraid of you, had proved too exhausting to keep up for very long. But now Remus found it very easy indeed. He barely spoke to Madame Pomfrey, except to demand to be allowed an extra few nights in the hospital wing. "Really, Remus, rest is important, but staying in bed all day isn't healthy. You need exercise." I don't feel well, he would repeat from under the covers. It was childish, but she let him be childish. She knew what had happened. She felt sorry for him. The nurse tutted and signed him in for another night. Dumbledore was the worst, the bringer of bad news, as always. He had arrived the evening after it happened, to offer his own useless perspective on the situation. Remus sat up in bed, arms crossed, unflinching and unmoving. Mr. Snape has calmed down considerably, you may be pleased to hear, Dumbledore said. He certainly had a fright, but he has been persuaded to act in the best interest of his school and his fellow pupils. Remus snorted at this. Dumbledore did not react. So, no harm done. Your friend, Mr. Black. Not my friend, Remus said, without looking at Dumbledore. He stared forward. Remus. Is he expelled? No, Dumbledore said quietly. What Sirius did was incredibly foolish, incredibly dangerous, but it was a mistake. I have no doubt that he is truly repentant. He has learnt a very valuable lesson here. Oh, brilliant, Remus snorted again, tightening his arms as if they were all that kept him together. As long as the Black Heir has learnt a good moral lesson, as long as it's benefited his personal development. Remus, as long as we can all look back at this and think, what an excellent parable. Thank goodness we all know exactly what happens when you send your enemy after a deadly fucking monster. Remus! He stopped, his face hot, and finally looked at Dumbledore. Cool, forget-me-not blue eyes stared back at him. Remus was reminded of their first meeting. He'd been rude then, too, and angry. You have every right to feel what you are feeling, Dumbledore said, calm as ever. And rest assured, Sirius will be punished. Remus wanted to mumble something sarcastic about the effectiveness of detentions when it came to Sirius Black. He didn't. Dumbledore continued. I will caution you now, as I did once before when a childish prank got out of hand. Passion is an important quality, but we must all learn to exercise control. Bit late for that. You have been horribly let down by someone close to you, and I am very sorry. But you cannot let this incident... People close to me have been letting me down since I was 5, Remus said bitterly. I'm used to it. Anyway. He hunched down on his bed, wishing Dumbledore would go away and leave him in peace. We weren't that close. That's a pity, Dumbledore replied. He stood up. Because we all need each other more than ever, soon enough. Forgive and forget, Remus. Remus did not say goodbye. He just rolled back over and tried to sleep. Madame Pomfrey would not let him stay 3 nights in a row. He went straight to Professor McGonagall instead. He knocked twice on the door, then barged straight in. Remus, are you quite well? Send me back. Excuse me? His head of house stood up from where she'd been sitting behind her desk. Send me back, he repeated, clenched fists. To St. Edmund's. Exams are finished. I don't need to be here. Remus, the term is not finished. Unless you are unwell, I cannot send you anywhere. So, I'm a prisoner. Of course not, you silly boy. Sit down. He thought about refusing, or even storming straight back out again. But she was so stern, and something drilled into him at an early age forced him to obey the raised voices of older women. She sat too, the colour in her face going down. She swished her wand, and a kettle appeared, along with 2 cups and saucers. "Tea, Mr. Lupin?" "No, thanks." "Come along now," she tutted, pouring him a cup anyway. "I find that the most unpleasant conversations can be made easier with the right refreshments. Help yourself to a biscuit." She nodded to a plate, which had not been there moments before. "I'm fine. I just want to go," he said, his voice as level as he could keep it. "Yes, that much has been made clear." She sipped her tea. "But I'm not going to send you back to St. Edmund's." "Tell Madame Pomfrey to let me sleep in the hospital wing, then." "I shall do no thing. You have a perfectly good bed in Gryffindor Tower." "I can't go there." "Gryffindors do not run away from our problems, Mr. Lupin." "Yeah, but Slytherins run away from werewolves," he spat. He looked at her, fixing her with a glare he thought he had almost perfected now. "I would have been arrested, sent to Azkaban, or put down. I wouldn't even know I'd done anything wrong. And it's all his fault." Oh no, he had to stop there. He was in quite serious danger of bursting into tears, and that could not happen. Under no circumstance was Remus going to cry over this. McGonagall was kind, and waited for him to compose himself. He took a few short breaths, letting his curls fall in front of his face before finally he was able to meet her eye again. "I can't sleep in a room with the person who did that." "That's perfectly reasonable," she said gently. He blinked. "What?" "I'm not completely heartless, Mr. Lupin," she smiled. "Believe me, I know how you must have felt. I can imagine, at least. And I can tell you I have had serious words with Mr. Black myself. He's off the Quidditch team, detention for the rest of the year, 100 points lost, but we cannot make any drastic changes to your sleeping arrangements, not without anyone asking why." It clicked. For the past few days, Remus had placed his pain at the centre of the universe. He had forgotten that no one else in the school knew a thing. "Oh," was all he could muster. "I am sorry, Remus," McGonagall said. "It's a horrendous cruelty, but it must be borne." "That reminds me." He fished in his pocket for his prefect's badge. He had broken the transfiguration spell on it and wrapped it in the tissue paper, but it still felt hot in his hand. He placed it onto the desk. "Take that back. Give it to, I don't know, give it to James. I can't do it anymore." "Remus," McGonagall sounded sad now, pleading. "Don't let this set you back. Talk to your friends." He shrugged. "Can I go?" He went to the library. Where else? It would be simple enough for the marauders to find him if they wanted to. But then, they had the map too. There was nowhere to hide, except maybe the Shrieking Shack, and Remus would be damned if he ever spent longer in there than absolutely necessary. Fortunately, everyone else seemed to be outside, enjoying the early summer sunshine, leaving the library pretty much empty. He read, or tried to, anyway. It wasn't easy to concentrate when his own brain kept interrupting. "Should never have snogged him." "Look, piss off, I'm not in the mood." "Oh, charming. You're the one who keeps trying to chat." "I want to talk to Grant, not you. You're a shit substitute." "Well, you've got to ask yourself what that says about you, don't you? Find someone real to chat to if you're so keen." "What's it got to do with the kiss?" "Ooh, it's a kiss now. Snogging's good enough for Grant, but the great and glorious Sirius Black, it's kissing." "Either be helpful or leave me alone." "I told you, the real Grant told you, not to kiss him. You thought you got off easy when you decided to ignore it, but now you're paying." "You're saying I did this?" "That's what it sounds like." "It's not very kind." "Was I supposed to be?" "I miss Grant." "Tough luck." Eventually, it began to get dark. He missed dinner. He didn't think he could bring himself to eat in front of the marauders anyway. He just waited. It was only 2 weeks to go until term ended. He could avoid them for that long. He'd done it before. Stay in the library, get up early, go to bed late. Piece of cake. He was chased out of the library at 9 o'clock, and starving hungry by now, took a detour to the kitchens. The house elves there were only too happy to serve, building a plate of sandwiches, crisps and sweets, enough to feed a whole classroom. Remus scoffed the lot, and could have asked for seconds, but it was time to bite the bullet. He walked slowly, as if that might help, and was waylaid by Lily on her prefect's patrol. "Hiya," she smiled. "Feeling better?" "Yeah, much," he nodded. "How are you?" She looked down, fiddled with her hair. "Oh, you know, fine. Sev's stopped lurking outside the common room now, at least." "Sorry about all of that." "It isn't your fault." She waved a hand. "I really thought that... Oh, it's stupid, but I thought that maybe one day he'd change his mind about all that pure-blood nonsense, and when he did, I'd still be there. Like, all I had to do was just keep being his friend, and everything would just work out for the best. Stupid." She shook her head. "Not that stupid," he replied, because it seemed like a nice thing to say. "Yeah, well, could have saved myself a lot of heartache," she shrugged stoically. "Why are you wandering around anyway? Go to bed. You've not been well." He smiled at her. He hadn't smiled in ages. He was about to turn and keep going when something made him change his mind. He bent down and wrapped his arms around Lily, squeezing her. She hugged back, which only made him grip harder until he had lifted her off her feet and she squealed, laughing. "God, you're stronger than you look, Lupin." "Sorry," he blushed, setting her down. "No, it was nice." She smiled up at him, patting his shoulder. "You okay?" "Yeah." He didn't feel okay, entering the common room. Fortunately, it was very quiet. Some students still had exams. Others were wiped out after the long day in the hot sun. The marauders were not there, but they had been recently. Remus knew exactly what he was going to do. He had fallen into place in the library as he mulled over the first confrontation, like a play he had to rehearse. He went up the stairs. It was silly, he knew, but ever since his birthday, he had lingered just for a second on that one step in the staircase, every time he went up to bed or down for breakfast. This castle kept memories. The Marauder's map had taught him that much. And that step had held Remus's sweetest memory of all. He stepped over it now, resolute. He pushed the door open with some force, startling the 3 boys inside. They were sitting on their beds. Peter was in his pyjamas, looking glum. Remus could only assume that meant no change with Desdemona. James was half undressed, rattling around in his bedside cabinet for something. Sirius was reclining, clearly about to make a sarcastic comment. When Remus entered, he sat up straight. Remus walked straight to his own bed and picked up his pyjamas. He did not speak, but went straight for the bathroom, which he locked, then cast a silencing spell. He didn't want to hear them. He wasn't sure how he'd react to it. He washed, brushed his teeth. He put on his night things. Remus was more than aware that he lost some of his authority when he dressed in a pair of baggy blue and white pyjama bottoms and a greying vest, but he had quite a few new scars and didn't want to undress in front of them. He took a deep breath. He walked out, crossing quickly to his bed. "Moony, Sirius started. Remus ignored him and turned to James. "Thank you for stopping Severus, James," he said emotionlessly. "You saved both our lives." James started, but Remus had climbed into bed and closed his curtains with a flick. "Well," he thought to himself. "That's that then." End of chapter 91.